Hello everybody, Desiree here with Honeysuckle Homestead Retreat. I just woke up about 30 minutes ago. I was all snug and warm under my blankets and my covers with my dogs, and I get out of bed and it is 48 degrees in here. Wow, so it's 48 degrees in here, it is 30 degrees outside. At least it's warmer inside than it is outside, but it's still just a little bit too chilly for me. So I am going to start a fire. And this video is about how to start a fire in a tiny wood stove. So the first step in starting a fire in a tiny wood stove is to clean out all the ashes from any previous fire, which I have already done here. To start my fire, I like to start with some newspaper or cardboard, and then I put fat wood in on top of that. So as you see here, I'm putting the cardboard in first, and then I put the fat wood in like a teepee type fashion, as you see here. And this is what it looks like right before I start the fire. Next, I light a piece of paper or cardboard and I carefully place it in the stove to light the kindling. Then I make sure all the air controls are open so as much air as possible can get into the stove and feed the fire. After I do that, and after my fat wood has caught on fire, then I will close the door. Once you get a good fire going with the kindling, you will want to add additional pieces of wood, but you're going to start out with smaller pieces and then medium-sized pieces, and then you'll eventually get up to your logs. But the idea is to build a progressively larger fire over time. And you also want to get your flue temps up. So the idea is you want to get your flue temp up to about 400 degrees as quickly as possible. That way it creates a really good draft for your fire. Once I've got a good fire going and I see the flue temp is getting close to 400 degrees, then I will go ahead and add on a log. This lever that I'm pulling right now activates the mechanical riddling grate that is in the stove. So what that does is when I move it back and forth like that, it actually shakes all the ashes that are developing in the bottom of the fire to the ash pan below. And that allows more airflow to come up through underneath the fire. I wait for the first log to get sufficiently charred before I add a second log onto the fire. And I also keep all of my air controls open whenever I add a new log, or if it's just the beginning of me starting a fire and I'm really wanting to get a nice bed of coals started. I actually keep all of my air controls open in the beginning. So you may have noticed I have two different thermometers on my flue. The top one is actually meant for the stovepipe, and the bottom one is for the stove top. I have both of them on here just so that I can get a better reading of what the temperature is closer to being. And I kind of just gauge it based on what both temperatures are saying and realize that it's probably somewhere in between the two. The top one shows a recommended best operation range of 230 degrees to 475 degrees. And then the bottom one, which is meant for the stovetop, its best operating temperatures are way too high for the flue. But like I said, I'm not actually using the bottom one for determining what the best range is. I use the bottom one to kind of get a more accurate reading of about where I'm at between the two temperatures. So as you can see in this instance, it is saying that the top one is just showing it in the middle between 230 degrees and 475 degrees, which is great. But the bottom one is kind of showing it being about a little over 400 degrees. So it gives me a better idea of about where we're at. Now, if you look in the manual for the tiny wood stoves, they say that anything below 200 degrees Fahrenheit is too cool, and that the optimal burn is actually between 225 and 475 degrees. 500 to 700 and more is way too hot. And I actually experienced too hot once before. I had a fire going and I wasn't really paying attention. I wasn't watching the flue temps. I was just trying to get the fire started and getting the flue up to speed. And it actually got too hot. The reading on the bottom thermometer was saying it was 700 degrees, and the top one, it was definitely way past the best operation zone. And my stovepipe actually started smoking. So there was smoke coming out of the cracks of the pipe itself. It didn't get red hot or anything, thank goodness. I think I would have really been scared. But what I did immediately was I just dampened all the air controls. I just completely took away all the air that I could out of the fire to get it to lower as quickly as possible, and that solved my problem. I'm about to add another log on. So what I do first is open up all the air controls. As you can see, I do the top one and then I do the bottom two. And then I slowly crack open the door before I open it up all the way. I will leave the air controls fully open until that new log gets charred. And then after it gets charred, I will dampen them down again. The differences between the air controls are as follows. The primary air is what enters the stove below the fire grate. So this is the air that you're going to want to use when you're first starting a fire or whenever you add new fuel, like a new log. But after that, after you've got a good fire going, you've got a nice bed of coals, and the fire is burning really well, you're going to want to actually turn down this primary air control, because what it does is it burns a hotter and quicker fire, and it's a lot less efficient. The secondary air control is what enters the firebox through the rear air plate towards the top of the stove. So after the wood is going and everything's burning nicely, this is going to be your main source of air that you're going to want to have. Now, I actually use a secondary air source, but I do even dampen that down some as well. The tertiary air, or the air wash, is just above the stove door, and it's called an air wash because it actually shoots air right over the glass, and it helps to keep the glass clean. It also contributes some air to the bottom front of the fire. Whenever you decide to dampen the stove for a slower burn, a good starting point is to dampen it about 50%. I personally like to shut down the primary air control about 50%, and also the tertiary air control by 50%, and then I'll go back and adjust it, and I'll pretty much completely close the primary air control, and then I end up lowering my tertiary air control to about 30%. And then my secondary air control, I usually keep that about 30% as well. If you have your own tiny wood stove, though, you will have to experiment with the air settings, because It isn't determined by the stove, but by the flue system. So each installation is going to give different results. Okay, I just wanted to show you guys what kind of wood I'm using right now. I actually bought this wood in Atlanta, Georgia. It is kiln dried wood, and what's really important is that it is pest free. So you are not actually supposed to bring firewood in from other locations. It's supposed to be a certain radius from wherever you're going to be burning it. The radius is pretty small. I don't remember exactly what the radius is supposed to be. Wood that is not certified pest-free could potentially have pests in it, and if it's stored outside or even inside, these pests could be released and then get out into the surrounding forest and could become an invasive species. If you do ever bring in firewood that is not certified pest-free, the best thing for you to do is to burn it immediately. That way you can kill whatever is inside of the wood. I just wanted to show you guys the little setup that I have here. So underneath the stove, I have medium-sized pieces of wood, I would say. They're like smaller pieces to get the fire going. And next to the fire, I have my big logs, as big as you're gonna get from my tiny wood stove. And next to that, in an Amazon box, is my starter wood and starter supplies, like cardboard. And these fat wood sticks, which are great for starting a fire. And just, you know, just little pieces of wood. So my fire starters are over here. And then to the left of that, I've got my big logs that I have not cut into pieces yet. So it has been about an hour and 10 minutes. And I have the fire now on a slow burn. So as you can see, this is closed almost all the way. Not quite closed. The bottom flue is completely closed. And then the one over here is slightly open. And it gives us this really nice, slow, warm burn. It's very mesmerizing to look at. And after an hour and 10 minutes, our temperature is up to 63 degrees in here. A really good indication of an efficient burn is when you go outside and you look up at your chimney. If you see no smoke coming out, that means you are burning your fuel very efficiently. If there's black smoke billowing out, that means it is not an efficient burn. So we got a pretty good fire going now, which is awesome. The temperature in the house has gotten up to about 72 degrees. It is a little bit cooler in the loft, but it will take time to warm up my entire house. Even though it's only 160 square feet, it is also a tiny stove. Tiny house, tiny stove, it's all relative, right? And I do have very big windows in my tiny house. And even though my windows are double paned, it does cut down on the insulation. So that's something else that I have to contend with in my tiny house off-grid. But I will continue to add the little small logs throughout the day. I'll probably put on a log about every hour, I would guess. And I will do that all day until I go to bed. And then overnight, I let the fire burn out. And then in the morning, I start all over again. I clean out all the wood ash, and then I start a new fire. So that is my routine here. And it's worked quite well for me. I stay pretty warm under my blankets up in my loft, and also snuggled up with the doggies. So I actually got too hot the other night, and I had to change into a t-shirt and shorts. Believe it or not, I actually got too hot, and it was 25 degrees outside. Okay, well that is it for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. And if you're not subscribed to my channel yet, please subscribe. And if you haven't done this yet, go ahead and hit that like button and like my video for me. It really helps the algorithms to pick up on videos that they're useful and other people will watch them. So help me help other people. Well, that is it. Thank you guys. I will see you next time.